Hi, and welcome to the Mid-Level Exceptional Sport Business Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Easy. I'm the Director of Sales Development with the Portland Trailblazers. I am here with Janaki Cash. She is the Director of Strategy and Revenue Innovation with the New York Mets. Janaki, thank you so much for joining me here this morning for me, this afternoon for you.
No problem, Joe. Always happy to do this for you.
So excited to be able to have a chance to talk with you a little bit. We've obviously known each other for a while. I'm going to throw this out there for anybody listening. This is my first time leading one of these podcasts. So bear with me if things are a little bit rough at some points.
It's also my first time recording something like this, and I'm coming to you live from Brooklyn, New York, where at any moment the police station across the street could get exciting or the fire trucks can go by. So
if nothing else, you're in for an adventure, folks. All right, so Janaki, walk us through a little bit about your backstory, your career journey, and your path to where you are today.
Yeah, no problem, Joe. So, look, in college, I thought I was going to be a veterinarian, and that was my initial game plan. I specifically picked my college because of its veterinary school ranking. So I went to Oklahoma State University, go Pokes, and we picked that school specifically for its vet program, which is nationally ranked and has a lot of, I think, just accolades behind it. Not only to mention that at the time it was being funded by major grants from Boone Pickens and his wife. So initially started there for that, but kind of had my heart broken as to just how tough it is to be a veterinarian. So shout out to them, because I know they took the job because they love animals, but what a heartbreaking job sometimes. I'm sure it has its perks, but it definitely crushed me seeing, I think, sick animals. So, at that time it was like, time to pivot. What do you pivot to? And going to a school with a major sports program in both football and basketball, that kind of seemed like my natural opportunity to combine a love for watching the game with working. So I became an intern and spent a lot of time with the football team doing on-field stuff, basketball, same thing, women's soccer, and got the full scope of just like what it's like to be part of the team that produces what goes on the field, on the court, whatever you want to call it. And so I did that for a couple of years and I loved it. I loved my bosses. I loved the opportunity. But then as it came to being my senior year, I started having some of the conversations that I think definitely annoyed some, because I was asking my boss how much money she made. And then I was asking people around her, like one of our associate athletic directors, how much money does he make? And, whatever.
Conversations everyone loves to have.
Yeah, I mean, I don't love having that conversation now, but I, was a snot-nosed college kid who thought everyone owed me that information, and that just isn't the case. So at that time, they were trying to like find the right path for me based on like my talents, and so I started working in the ticket office on game days. And like talking to people a lot got me to that point of, I really appreciated talking to the fan base, who is passionate as can be. And I started to see like a different side of the business. And so roundabout way, get connected to the right people who told me I should apply for an open job with the Oklahoma City Thunder. And so for context, Stillwater, Oklahoma, where Oklahoma State is about 50 minutes from Oklahoma City, which is where the Thunder is housed. And so it was in kind of a no-brainer at that time. I was applying to a lot of colleges, athletic programs, because that's what I knew, but I did not know at all that there was this like powerhouse of people that make professional teams run. You just kind of think they're out there, they just operate because they're cool. People want to be around, you never know that. And like, despite being in sports management and all this, it was kind of like, I never knew just exactly how in depth the front office was. And so I applied. There were over 700 applicants that year for that job. And I was one of two people selected to be part of inside sales. So Joe, you and I recruit a ton. I don't think the odds are ever that ridiculous, but they were pretty ridiculous. And my director at the time, who is now I think he's the CRO of the Dallas Stars, Matt Bowman, played a nice trick on me, basically telling me I didn't get the job, but then I got the job, which I will never forget how that felt. But I got it, and I started, I think June 24th, and 7 days later, the NBA entered a lockout, which lasted until Christmas. So it was a great first 6 months of my job.
Great timing.
I know, perfect timing. And, as Joe mentioned, I'm with an MLB team, so we just popped out of a lockout as well. So I've now gone through two. I don't wish it on anybody. It's an interesting experience, but the first one was definitely the hardest. So started in inside sales, literally had no clue what my job was before I started it. And then once I started it, as we all know, it's just a grind. What you can add to that grind is the fact that we were watching teams fire their front offices as we were progressing into the lockout. And my teammate in inside sales, who's one of my best friends in the world to this day, he and I were looking at each other like, oh my God, we're going to be the first to go. Like for sure, the first to go. So we were doing just about everything we could to show our worth to the organization, which kind of meant selling our asses off, which we did. Sold courtside shares, suite leases, which is kind of not something that inside sales always puts their hands on. But that's what he and I were doing in a lockout. So it gave us a lot of, I think, not clout, but like credit for just how hard we were working at that time. Not to mention it was a team on the rise. What became what became a finals contender that year, and then followed up multiple years of being a Western Conference contender. So was part of the team that sold out the building for season tickets. And then I spent the subsequent 8 years at the Thunder working on memberships and premium mainly, and just had a lot of fun doing that. I feel like I've talked for a lot. Do you have anything to add or chime in on?
Well, so you did active sales and membership and in premium for 8 years, and then talk about your pivot into leadership.
Well, it's an interesting story. I would say I think everyone wants to claim it came naturally, but it didn't. Like, I was very competitive for a long time, and I didn't exactly always want to share my successes with others. Like, I know I'm supposed to sit here and tell you like, oh my God, I brought everyone along with me. Heck no. Like, I was hella competitive, and like, we are in sales, and I always just wanted to be at the top of the board. And I wanted to be the best. My director in Oklahoma City would probably tell you his biggest challenge with me was like, how come I never hit like metrics appropriately, but the sales are there. So what's the difference? And so I think that was probably always the challenge, was realizing that I was going against the grain a little bit with the way I did things. But I was having success. So I needed to pass some of that stuff along to people because there are different ways of doing the job. So it really kind of came about by connecting with some of our younger members, naturally, like as friends. And they started getting more comfortable coming to me and being like, hey, like, how do I do this? Hey, would you come on this meeting with me? And it was very organic. And I started enjoying that. And then I was like, okay, like, this seems like something I would like to do. I went really, really, really far with another NBA team on becoming their inside sales manager. And they ultimately went with someone else, and the person they went with had less experience than I did. And it drove me up a wall. And I walked into my VP's office, who is still the VP in Oklahoma City, and also one of my mentors in life and in job, and one of the greatest humans you'll ever meet, Scott Loft. And so Scott always put up with my attitude. I don't know that he needed to, but as he'll tell me, we both wear our emotions on our sleeves. So he saw that part in me that he has. And I think let me do things I probably had no business doing, like walking into his office and freaking out about losing a job, because what was cited is I have no responsibilities on my resume of leading others or hiring a staff or managing a staff. I'm like, how am I supposed to do that when I have to make X amount of calls a day and I have to close X amount of deals a day? Like, where's the, that's a tough thing that no one really tells you, like, here's how you're supposed to do it. So what I love about him is he walked me through that situation and very quickly was like, hey, like, we have an entire intern team that comes and handles sales on game nights for us. Why don't we talk about you running it? And that was my first foray. Then I started, interviewing, hiring, had to fire someone a month in. How do I do all this? And so I just kind of went completely at it. I will chime in here that like everything happens for a reason. I was completely devastated by losing that job opportunity. But in the month after, found out I was pregnant with my daughter. And, like if I had taken that job, not only would my maternity leave stuff had reset and I would have been starting at ground zero, but I don't know that I would have had time to like integrate in a new culture and manage staff and work game nights when I was a new mom. So I think it's important to note I'm a big believer in everything happens for a reason.
Great. So looking back at your career, obviously you've talked a little bit about doing things differently, but still being able to hit the numbers and close the business you needed to do. What specifically do you think you did to set yourself apart while you were coming up, to put yourself in position to be a front runner for that inside sales manager job, and then to be somebody that your VP wanted to take time with and continuing to develop?
Annoyed him a lot. That's, I'm fairly certain that's what he'd say. And I know that's the truth, but I don't think, I probably didn't do everything the right way. I always have thought that I'm better than probably I am. I'm very confident. And so as a young professional, I thought I deserved the world. I mean, my first day, I talked to our SVP and he asked me what I wanted to do or who I expected to be in life or where I expected to be in life. And I was like, well, I expect to be sitting in your chair. Like, yeah, that sounds great. It's also such an attitude that's like totally unnecessary. And I can look back now and be like, okay, Janaki, like you could have been better there, but I thought I was the greatest. So I think just having really respectful, not respectful, just like really understanding mentor in Scott, who kind of got where I was coming from the perspective of like, I maybe put on this big facade of the confidence, but like internally, I just want to be the best. So how do I get there? And he did a lot of the advising. I got to the point where like when things frustrated me, I tried to go to him about it. When I didn't feel like I was doing the best, I go to him about it. How do I do better? Where do I do better? And so over time, between that and ultimately the connections I made, that is what led to the next step. And so I can attribute a lot of the successes I have had to the people around me who believed in me because they went off and sang my praises. So when I ultimately came to Brooklyn, Brooklyn recruited the heck out of me for months. I like straight up told Chris at the NBA, I will never go work in Brooklyn. So again, there comes the like overconfident, know everything girl, but I was like, no shot, not even an option. And then look at where I ended up. Like they came after me and I loved everyone that I had met there. And the biggest, most important thing to me was when I came to Brooklyn for my interview and I sat down in front of 3 men that I absolutely adore, in people that will be in my life forever. So one of those people is Dan Lefton, who is now the SVP in Detroit. So if you can count, like we have Scott, who's, my number one, and I'd say Dan is my number 1A. They're interchangeable. No one's always at the top, but Dan sat across from me in this presentation where I emphatically am talking about my plan for their inside sales team, but then asked me questions about my kid and how did I expect to manage being a mom in that role, but not in a negative way. Because at that point, I've had interviews with other teams where the second I say I'm a mom, it's like, you can see it from their faces. They're no longer interested in you. Mm-hmm. And he, on the other hand, was like, tell me all about her. Like, what is she like? I have 3 kids. And it just felt right. And so I think that relationship and I think connecting with him organically is what led to me officially getting that offer from Brooklyn and uprooting and moving across the country.
Well, as you mentioned your daughter again, this is a good opportunity to kind of pivot a little bit. As we were planning out the conversation and looking at some things that you wanted to talk about, that we wanted to talk about, one of the things that's really important to you is helping other women get their start and grow in the industry and potentially avoiding some of the pitfalls that you ran into as you were coming up. What are some things that you referenced the interviews, but what are some things that you may have had to endure as a young woman that you wish you were a little bit more proactive about stopping?
Yeah, I'd like to say a lot of this stuff has changed, but I think if it's changed around me, it has a lot to do with the woman I am, but also the women that I choose to surround myself with. And we kind of put our foot down. It's just like not something we're okay with. There is, whether it exists or not, and like, I think anyone that knows me and ends up listening to this podcast knows I can be opinionated and controversial at times, but whether it exists or not, there is some grouping of people in this industry that think young women want to join the industry just to be player adjacent. And I can tell you with a whole lot of confidence, like it's never mattered to me. It's cool. Sure. Look, I started a team that had Kevin Durant, James Harden, Russell Westbrook. Like, I mean, come on, like generational talents, and went to a team which again had Kevin Durant and then Kyrie Irving. Like, they're great and they're incredible for the team. But like, as much as it's fun to watch them, and I am a fan of basketball, so I could just enjoy them for their craft and their capabilities, that's all it meant. There was never anything like emotional or physical that was a desire. And like, that is an unfortunate stigma that women in the industry, there's always just like I wonder if that's what she's here for. And it's like, no, you wouldn't do it with a guy, right?
Well, and the funny thing about that,
like, are you going to be here for this or no?
And the funny thing about that is that I've had so many more conversations, had to have so many more conversations with whether it's interns or people on my inside sales team about how to appropriately operate around players and why not to take an unnecessary detour down the locker room tunnel when you're going to your car after a game, and how to appropriately interact and not look for autographs or taking pictures and things like that, just in terms of being a fan and an employee and operate professionally.
So that is totally the right thing to do. I think recruiting and inside sales, what do we always hear? We hear I want to be the GM. It's like, love that for you, but what have you done to like be on that side of the industry? Like, do you play? Do you, we have to ask all those questions that like kind of makes it set in a little bit, that like, go for it and you follow your dreams, but I don't know that I'm the person to get you there, but like, those are professional career advising moments that are necessary. Hey, like, as awesome as it is that, for someone who worked in Cleveland, like you spent time around LeBron James to some degree with your job, like, don't take pictures of him, like, be professional. That's one conversation. The assumption that like, as a woman, you're in this industry for something more than just making a name for yourself and like being a career professional, that's what's ridiculous. And that's like what needs to go away, I think.
So how do you, and you said it may have changed just around your circle, how do you manage that process? Because you can't control what other people are going to think or how they're going to interact, but how do you either insulate yourself from that and focus on what you need to do, or stop those conversations from happening?
I try really hard to be open and honest about my experience with that. And I think the men, the allies that are around me now who are in leadership positions, they've heard this story and they're mortified for me because they know me now. They know me as the professional. They know me as the person who like gives her time to her work and then to her kid, and that's it. And they're like, wow, like people had that question about you. And so it almost makes them stop, reverse, and think a little bit, did I ever think that about somebody that I had no business thinking that about? And so that's about all I can do. Is the people who I work with and who are around me now, hey guys, this is how it was for me. And I don't want any other young female to go through that, because as I think I've said a few times, like, I'm competitive, I can be arrogant, and I am overly confident. That's the only reason I could put up with some of the commentary and still do me. It doesn't affect me, but I'm different. That's not like something everyone can do. I grew up with brothers that beat me up when I need to be beat up, and I beat them up too. So like, I'm used to that kind of rough and tumble environment, which not every woman is.
Sure. So it sounds like you have the support from leadership that you needed to get through and manage that, or at least you do now. Were you comfortable speaking up to that as it was happening to
Not at all.
leadership? So that
Took it, completely took it, shocked face.
Yeah.
Like, I can't hide my emotions. As I said, I wear them on my sleeve, and shocked face me was just probably like my eyes were probably popping out of my head, but like, I don't know that I had the words. And
So
I don't know what you say.
Yeah, as somebody in obviously who's led teams, one of the things that shocked me the most is I found out several years after it happened that a woman on my team who was outselling the men on her team, they were getting jealous, competitive, frustrated, and they were telling her, well, the only reason that you're selling more than us is because of this, and going to gender-based negative stuff. And that never surfaced with me. It hadn't gotten brought up with me. And I found this out a few years later after she had been promoted a couple different times. And learning that was so frustrating on so many different levels. One, I was upset at myself for not being plugged in enough and connected enough to be aware of it, but also not being able to create an environment that she felt comfortable talking to me about it earlier enough in my career in leadership. So it's something that, as leaders, we all have to be aware of and cognizant of, that we have to be able to create. It's not enough to respond when it happens, but we have to be able to create that atmosphere and be proactive enough that people can have those conversations with us, whether it's about gender, sex, or something else.
Well, you, first of all, are the reason why this stuff is getting better, because you see it that way. And you are one of the leaders that I think a lot of people should look to emulate, from how you manage your staff and your successes. What you're saying, and I think that's a big thing for me, like, to me, that is culture. Mm-hmm. Culture, and my now boss says this all the time, culture is not jeans and beer and pizza, which is what it's usually put out there as. Culture is like, oh, I know that if I was getting harassed or talked down to or uncomfortable with my peers, that if I went and had a confidential conversation with my boss, they would manage it for me. They would hold my hand to some degree through it, and we do it together. And I think that only develops from organic, appropriate relationships. I think, and again, as with many things I'm sure I'll say on this, like, there's always going to be another take, but it is more important to me that you have a team that is capable. So we recruit well, right? We know how to recruit these kids. Like, we know what their backgrounds need to look like. We know, candidly, like, can they hold a conversation? All of those are things that, like, definitely are important. But on the forefront, as soon as they come to your house, how do you make them feel? Do they feel as though they can come to you? Do they feel as though they have to hide things from you? And I know there are instances where my team has been, because, like, I'm somewhat intimidating. So as much as I would like to, like, foster this perfect home, yeah, there's definitely times they're afraid to tell me stuff or they're nervous, but, like, is handle it for them. If you have to reprimand for something, reprimands, and then move forward. But I will tell you that, like, I'm pretty cut and dry. If I was in your seat and I had found that out in the moment, I don't know that I'd be advocating for those guys to be sticking around the team. To me, that's toxic. Mm-hmm. And you gotta go. That's a non-starter. Like, you gotta go. And I hope wherever you land next, because every job loss is an opportunity for growth, right? Mm-hmm. I hope that wherever you land next, you realize that you really kicked yourself in the ass the previous time, and you better fix the way you handle things like that. but I'm really proud of your girl. Obviously she's continued to get promoted, so like, let's go. But proud that she did handle herself, but sad that she had to.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So we've talked quite a bit about early career Janaki and kind of your transitions and your growth. I'm curious, looking back on things, and you referenced when you first started where you wanted to be. At this point in your career, what does success look like, and what does it mean to you, and has that changed over time?
It's definitely changed over time. I think there's only a handful of people whose opinions matter to me, and success is ensuring that all of them still feel the same way about me at the end of the day. So from the mentor side and the people who I lean on to advise me on my career, I'm never looking to be a black mark, because I consider myself part of their coaching tree, right? And like, to some degree I am, and it's a source of pride for them, and it's a source of pride for me that like I continue to grow my career and I'm always like somewhat hitched to their wagon. And then in my current role, like, look, if my current boss looks at me and goes, what the heck, like, where, you're not doing XYZ, or you haven't, done XYZ, that's, his opinion is success right now. And my role is unique enough that like, sometimes that's not always fully defined. So, he and I had a call this morning where he gave me concrete, this is success. I'm like, you got it. Like, and as a sales girl background, I'm like, oh my God, now I'm tunnel visioning to that number, or I'm tunnel visioning to that goal. So it's changed over time, because it used to be, here's my goal. And every time I sold something, I'd chip away at it down to the zero. And then I always was the one that had like my own personal goal, which was always a couple $100,000 over the original one. So like, then we start that process, and it's just a piece of paper that I would, physically mark off because it just felt good to do. And now it's like, not only how is my how is my job role being successful, and like, what value am I bringing to the New York Mets, but it's, am I supporting women in the industry? Am I there for people who need me? Do I try to give back in the community? Do I try to give back in the organization? Am I a resource for anyone that needs to use me as a resource? That's kind of, I kick myself if I feel as though I let somebody down in a space, even if that means I can't hop on a Zoom because I technically have 3 at the same time. But yeah, it's a different definition of success now, for sure.
So you referenced that your job is so unique, and your current role is so unique. This focus on strategy and innovation is a very new position in our industry. Can you describe it a little bit more, and talk a little bit about how it's different from your talent and development focus when you were leading an inside sales team?
Yeah, so towards my tail end in Brooklyn, through the pandemic, and like, didn't have an inside sales team anymore. So it was almost like, where can I be impactful in this organization again? Like, where's my use and worth? And my responsibilities started shifting more to like collaboration with other departments on like, how can tickets be at the forefront of everything everyone's doing, right? We're ticketing what we always think kind of know to some degree we're very important for the overall health of the organization, but it's like, how are we the forefront of marketing's mindset, of the website's mindset, of partnerships, who has their own whole priorities, but like, how do we be the forefront of that? So I started doing some of that in Brooklyn, and was able to, I was just able to do a lot of collaboration with other departments, that it was a new way of looking at the job. I've always thought that it was like inside sales manager, director of sales, VP of sales, senior VP of sales. Like, that's the only option I have. And so I was laser focused on that path. But then I was starting to see like, hey, there's a real need for a role that ultimately puppet masters a lot of other departments, but the whole goal is the elevation and success of ticketing and the brand as a whole. But as ticketing people, that's what we focus on. So that is to some degree the role. You don't have to call me a puppet master, but it's almost like an internal singular consulting agency that spends time with partnerships and tries to find opportunities on the front end of a deal to like integrate ticketing. On the back end, as we're looking to put out new offers and new opportunities for ticket deals, as Joe, like baseball is ridiculous in comparison to the NBA. Like, just think from a concept of double the games, double the stadium size. Like that alone tells you the difference. So it's like, how do we get people here? And finding opportunities for partners to intertwine with some of those offers that we push out. From a marketing perspective, I'm spending a lot of time with like the creation of our externally facing product placement, but also then how are we deploying that into the market? How, like, what are we spending on social ads? Like, are we targeting the right people from that perspective? So some of this is self-taught, and I've been learning from like a lot of people. I lean heavily on our BI department because BI is going to run the world one day, and I don't have a background in BI, so I love that they spend time with me and they teach me, but also show me how to do it on my own, so that like that way when I'm prepping things, I kind of already have an understanding of what I need to be focused on rather for whatever product it is we're looking to put out into the market. The revenue innovation side is probably the most exciting. However, I have not been able to focus much time on it as I've been integrating and kind of putting together a little bit of structure around like our strategy side. But that is, you know, for Kenny, my current boss, like it's really important. He wants to see like, what can we do different? Like not just different in sports, but like, what can we do different holistically? Like, is there something, you know, a tech company is doing that's like obviously getting them success? Like, how do we make that happen for our team? That's cool. I have a couple of ideas that we're working on right now that like, if we're able to launch them appropriately and have success with them, then yeah, it could become an industry standard down the line. But, you know, we want to test it. And part of innovation is you're going to end up failing at some point, because nothing's going to be perfect. So like with that failure, what are you going to do to change it up, amend it, fix it, and maybe relaunch it? Maybe it had an opportunity, you just didn't do it the right way, because I'm not perfect. But me in 2011 would have told you there's no shot I launched something that didn't just like perfectly work in the market. So at least I've learned just a little bit.
Well, now you're getting back into culture again a little bit, because you're obviously operating in an atmosphere that encourages innovation, encourages trial and failure and learning and adjustment and trying again.
I would think Kenny would tell you he hopes there won't be many failures, as does everybody. But yes, yeah, it's also the interesting thing about the transition from NBA to MLB is just I think the different way the leagues are run. And you know, you are very familiar, as am I. That's how you and I met. But like on the NBA side, there's a lot of talking. We would talk all the time. Like we just pick up a phone and call each other about stuff that we were wanting to do. So I'm trying to integrate into the MLB world. I don't have as many MLB contacts, so kind of doing that on my own, figuring out the right, you know, Kenny's helping. He's like, hey, these are the teams to talk with and like get an idea, because you know, the Mets unfortunately during COVID lost a lot of their staff. And so as we continue to staff back up, there are definitely things currently under my purview that I think in the long term probably won't be, but they are now. So not always things I know what I'm doing with. So it's nice to like talk to others and get a better understanding, just to, if anything, just to know like I'm on the right path.
Yeah. From a strategy and innovation perspective, you know, wanted to get your thoughts on something we hear about a lot in just the sports business media landscape. When people analyze and look at the ticket sales industry, you hear a ton about the death of the season ticket and the current way that the fans attend games isn't sustainable as a season ticket product, whether it's 43 games or 80 something games like in baseball. Is that something that you see as overblown? What does that term mean to you?
I don't think anyone has any business being on any outskirt sides of like an opinion, right? So like the death of sounds so intense and like a lot, but I don't think there's a death. There's a change, there's an amendment, there's evolution. And that has a lot to do with the new generations. And like my youngest brother, he's 22, like things that he values, I don't, things he consumes in a different way than I do. Like he'll talk about stuff like Twitch streams. Like I've never watched a Twitch stream. I have no clue what that is. I think I told you like the only reason I'm on TikTok is because of COVID. Like COVID started and I was like, okay, I'm a little bored. I guess I should try this out. And now I can't put it down. And I talk about it all the time. So it worked. Like congratulations, TikTok. It works. But to the concept of the season ticket, I think we're just going to have to always be ready to evolve with it. Now, speaking from the perspective of baseball, like when you have a passionate fan base that commits their time to being there, like we have, like the Mets have an incredible fan base who want to be at Citi Field as much as possible. The concept of missing a few games because of the lockout was just not fair to them, right? Why would we take that away from them? That's the point of the fan. They're so in. Perfect. They are their own subset category. Cater to them as such. Now, then you're going to, after that, you start to meet the fan. It's like, yeah, I kind of like it. You're right. How often can I get you out here? Can you grow their fandom? Of course you can. Like if a team goes on a run, yeah, everyone can get out of the way. Saw that in Oklahoma City. Saw that in Brooklyn when I came on board and all that we had was D'Angelo Russell and Jared Allen and Spencer Dinwiddie doing everything they could, but couldn't always fill up Barclays Center, which is the heart of Brooklyn. And then, well, you make a couple of trades and you get, you know, a generational talent with another incredibly talented player. And suddenly like the building is, people want to be there. Suddenly the guy that's told you for years, I don't want season tickets, is like, give me a season ticket. Like, how do I get it? Right. So like, it's not dead, but you got to be open with like packaging. We just launched like a flexible package that the whole concept is like, you build it. Like we'll give you the tool, we'll step back. You pick like not only from the game perspective what you're looking for, but like from the benefit perspective, what are you looking for? Are your benefits limited? They sure are, because our season ticket holders who commit all of their time and money and fandom to us, they deserve the world, and that's what we're going to do for them. But we like you and we really appreciate your support too. So like, here's something for you, but you get to pick it out. And then lastly will be like a subscription pass concept, which we are also looking at, in which it's like Netflix, but for sports in person. So it's like pay a certain set amount and come as you feel like, and you don't get any perks. You don't get a Joe on the other end of the phone picking up when you have a problem. It's like, sorry, you're gonna have to figure that out on your own. Just like no one from Netflix will pick up the phone either if you need them. But it's your choice to attend how you see fit. And that's the evolution, I think. It's not the death of, but it's the evolution of like how you want to consume your product. And also knowing that like Gen Z, they're very focused on community. They're focused on like giving back to the world. So like, is there a way to amend for them? Like what, I don't know, for every dollar you spend on a ticket, like we donate X amount, like, you know what I mean? There's like different ways to appeal to them, but I think it's understanding what's coming and that the people below us consume stuff differently and generationally. And they're also much more like conscientious of their money. And I think, being in COVID and seeing what everything has happened, like we have to be willing to evolve.
I really appreciate that perspective. And I think it's so great to be able to look at your fan base and your market and try and build out a product mix where it's not a one size fits all approach. It's here it is, take it or leave it. And that's the point of what we're trying to do in sales, right? Understand who you are as a customer, as a fan, and provide an option that makes the most sense for you and helps you achieve your goals, right? And then you tap into organizations, companies, the B2B side of things, where that's really where the season ticket comes into play. Obviously, in a market like yours, probably a lot more higher level than in a market like ours. But
The
Go ahead.
B2B part's the fun stuff. Like that's the stuff I used to love, just like diving into convincing, not convincing, I mean showing and sharing with like your C levels that like this is a sound investment because you never know. Like you get the right prospect in here on the right night and walk out with signed contracts. It used to be my favorite thing in Oklahoma City is just know like going to visit my B2B or my business clients and they're like, oh my God, I just closed. Do you know what contract I just closed? I just closed this. I'm like, cool, let's celebrate. That sounds awesome. But little note in the back of my head, come renewal time, don't you remember you closed that here in the arena? And it's like, I think it's for businesses and for larger organizations, especially as people are going hybrid. Some organizations are not even bringing people back home, back to the office. They're just letting them work from home. To me, it makes so much sense for them to invest in a season ticket or a package of some sort, or candidly, it's more like a group initiative because it's like, hey, 4 times a year, let's try and get together. And one time we'll do it, for us, it's like one time we'll do it at Citi Field. One time we'll do it at Barclays Center or MSG. One time we'll go on a boat cruise. Like you could do a few different things that still keeps the company connected, but especially if everyone's working remotely, fly people in, or if people are still in the vicinity, hey, let's just all meet up.
Remembering the value of that face-to-face interaction.
I think I really hope people see that. I feel like they do as we start to attend events and like things in person again. It's just so nice to like see someone.
Right.
And like we did a volunteer initiative last week in honor of Women's Month and like, or really International Women's Day. And we went and volunteered, but we were all doing it together and we're like at a food bank and we're packaging food together and we're touching things, we're talking to each other. And I think every single one of us was like, it's been literal years since we've been able to give back and do like good community service with another human being next to you. And you're talking about life and like random things, but it's good for the soul. So I really hope everyone feels that way. And it's not just me, but I think that's the case.
They definitely should. So looking more into the innovation side of your position, what are some of the things that you're most excited about for the future of our industry, whether that's sports or ticket sales or MLB as a whole?
I think for MLB as a whole, so we'll preface all this with this. I've talked about how much I love basketball and I could sit and watch it for days on end. Really excited about March Madness starting up this week and, went to a basketball heavy school and yada, yada, yada. In that context, outside of this past year, I have never gone to a baseball game. And you're talking to the girl that loves football and like hockey. I lived in Detroit. So like you were exposed to all of that. But baseball, no, I don't get it and I don't love it. But I look at this business a little bit differently because I'm just not like, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed when we sign Max Scherzer. I'm like, that's amazing. What does that mean? Also, like, what is that going to equate to on the business side? And I look at it a little bit more like that, which I can tell you with honesty, if, one of my all-time favorite players still to this day, and I think he deserves this shout out as Russell Westbrook, is like, if I was still in Brooklyn and they go, oh, we're trading for Russell Westbrook, would have lost my mind, would have told my staff, like, if you can't sell 100 grand in tickets today, like, you don't know how to do your job because like, that's what we just got, So I think it's fun being on a side where it's like, I don't fully integrate in the sport itself, but I see it from like a business mind and business perspective. So that being said about Major League Baseball is, where are the young fans? Where are the young women who are into Major League Baseball? Now, those that do exist, and I know some of them, their dads took them, their grandpas took them, their brothers played. And so that's their adjacent, how they're adjacent to the sport. But there isn't the casual, like, walk off the street, oh, I love this. I love coming to the ballpark. I love the experience. Like, they don't exist where they do in the NBA because of the way it's like, I think, positioned to their generation. So that's what I'm excited about. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. And obviously coming out of the lockout and kind of developing this next like game plan for a few years, there's like a good runway. And that's something I'd like to see. Like, I don't know that I always know exactly what I'm doing, but I want to find a way to appeal to a younger demographic, but also like integrating some of the like how do you get a group of girls to come to City Field? Oh, well, you put together an offer and you market it to them so that when they see it, it's just as easy as like swiping up on a cute pair of sneakers or a cute pair of anything. Like, they're like, oh, this looks like fun. And I'll send it out to my girlfriends and see if we can do it because it's affordable. It looks like fun. It's in the middle of the summer. At that point, it has nothing to do with the players. It has everything to do with the experience and what it feels like coming out to City Field.
And that just goes back to the foundational principle of sales, which is you sell the experience and not the players on the court, the players in the field, or wins and losses.
100%. Although after having marketed and product placed during this lockout where you couldn't even include a single one, like, we can have a little bit of them and it's nice.
But I love that initiative and those goals that you can figure out the secret to, especially driving younger fans, but women fans as well. I think you can make a lot of money, not just for the Mets, but for yourself by writing a book.
So I'm saying I don't know that I know what I'm doing, but I know that's the goal I have.
Mhm.
And I think like we would all love that. But just hoping that I look at it from more of a fun perspective and more of a, again, not like pivotally tied to like, how would you not want to come see these guys? Because I'm
Mhm.
like, these guys are incredible athletes, but I personally don't have an emotional tie to them. So like I can at least look at it a little more objectively.
Yeah, and I think there's been a lot of teams who have had that goal or that intent, may not have had the right people in charge of it, or their approach has been, we'll take a Mets logo and put it on a pink hat and attach that to a ticket. And
Girls
obviously
don't always love pink.
that's not the right way to go. So
you're a girl dad, like sometimes some days you love pink and some days your kid's like, my favorite color is black. I'm like, oh, excellent.
My daughter went through a very distinct tie-dye phase over the last 6 months. So that was a lot of fun.
But like we've been matching. So it's been both of us in the tie-dye phase, which I'm here for.
All right, Janaki, my last question for you, and this is kind of the big one. I'm going to put you in charge, not just of the Mets, not just of baseball, but the entire sport industry. You've got a magic wand to make any changes you want. What are the biggest changes you're going to make to our industry?
Oh, man. Okay. Well, I am nothing but authentic. So I'll say what I have to say. And then hopefully it doesn't bite me somewhere in the back end. True, and I mean true, authentic diversity, equity, and inclusion. It doesn't exist. It doesn't. I think there are definitely a couple of teams that have it figured out. Maybe a couple of leagues that have it figured out. But even then, it's not, there's no blanket solution. So I would love a day. Like it's funny because like you become so numb to it, but it's very tough hopping on calls where I am literally the only woman, I'm literally the only person of color. And, that's always happened. It's not like a new thing. And it's always awesome when you see another woman, you're like, oh yes, thank God. Okay, there's one, or you see another person of color, you're like, got you. We could like connect with each other. It's like a tiny little brotherhood and we're doing better. We definitely are, especially from like when I started and like seeing the differences. But I think authentic D&I or DEI doesn't always exist everywhere. And like, I really hope, like my heart of hearts, that like for the organizations that put it in place, that it is in order to truly make change. Because now it could get to the point where it's like, yeah, we've got one of those. We've got a diversity team. Cool. What do they do? Like, where's the follow-up? To your point, what did you ask in the beginning? How do I define success? Cool. How do you define success? And are you successful? But understanding and appreciating that. And look, one of my biggest I don't know if you want to call it a thing, but like I think everyone knows this about me. Like I'm a single parent. I'm a single mother in the sports industry. I am a unicorn from that perspective, from being a woman of color, like tying those two things together and being in sales for the most part. Like I don't exist. And why not?
Mhm.
Like, why not? Like anytime young professionals who are, in their mid 20s and they're women and they're like, I want to have a baby, but like, am I going to have to give up my career? Because that's what it feels like. I hate that that's their back end. That's what it
Mhm.
feels like. That's like, oh, no, like, why? Who told you that? Like, how can we figure it out? But there's a lot of things that come into play there. Flexibility, which I think COVID helped with, and like at least it definitely has for me, and like for the Mets, the way they've approached the return to office has been beautiful, and like I can't have asked for anything more and better. And so that starts with flexibility, that goes to appreciation, that like, if I told my boss like my kid's sick, so I'll be intermittent, the response is like, please take care of her, not, oh, are you still going to be able to make it to this? It's like, I don't have that answer for you. And please don't give me that added anxiety on the back end, because I'm like trying to care for my kid and like my head is like, oh my God, you're missing this. Oh my God, you're doing, understanding that like, I think as long as you know you have a committed employee, they're always going to try to do their best. But then you could question, do you have a committed employee or not? So that DEI is diversity. So that's, what do the people look like? If you look at your executive leadership team or you look at your entire company's faces, everybody looks like they're brothers and sisters. Like maybe not so much sisters, really just brothers. Like I wish you step up a little bit more to the plate there, please. From the equity perspective, it's the meaning, if I understand it correctly, and you can chime in here, Joe, and correct me, but like to me, equity means like someone does have a disadvantage. If you want to call me being a single parent a disadvantage, like great, but you understand that and provide them the tools to equally operate like everyone else does. I have that, and I'm very lucky to have that. Does everybody have that? My guess is no. And inclusion and inclusivity. Are you inclusive of new thoughts, new mindsets? Do you have a BRG in your company or an ERG where people discuss and like women can get together? And to your point, like, and I don't know if that was in existence in Portland when your rep was going through what she went through, but like, I would have hoped she had a women's ERG that she could have like maybe confided in someone. And then that person could have gone and championed for her. Not that they would have needed to with you, but like at least brought it to your attention and helped. So I think that is what I would ask to change humbly. And I think everyone's working on it, but it's truly just, does your diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives have a definition of success?
I love that. So many different pieces about what you just said, I think are fantastic. I'm going to not push back, but just put a little bit of a different spin, knowing that we both have the similar sales backgrounds. One of the things that you see in sales all the time is, okay, you hit this goal. Here's your goal for next year. What's next? What's next? And the moment you start to slide backwards is a moment that you really start to get pushback. And I think if organizations treated DEI more like they treat sales, and you'd really start to see consistent progress and success. Because great, you may have a diverse leadership team, but if you have two people step down and that eliminates all of your diversity on your senior leadership team, what does that lead to organizationally, culture-wise, in terms of the voices that are being heard, in terms of the things that are being brought up? And it's very easy to say we are in a good place until one thing changes or until two things change. And then making sure that you're always consistently saying, okay, we're in a good place, but what's next? Having this, the position that you're in with revenue, strategy, and innovation, having that concept of strategy and innovation throughout your whole organizational culture, especially as it applies to DEI, so that you're always looking, okay, what's next? What's next? Where do we need to improve on next? And where do we need to reinforce so we're not falling backwards?
Literally make that into a tagline, put it in a quick like blurb and send it out to all teams. Like that's it. You hit it like dead on perfectly. What's the plan? And if we treated it like sales, like no one would fail. Or if you failed, it's goodbye, Charlie. Like we'll find someone who's better. Not that that's great. I thought you were going down a path and I was about to be like, I wish sales managers always remembered that they haven't always been successful either. And then they treated their reps
That's
that
true
way.
too.
It's like, why are we demanding absolute excellence out of them 20? I mean, we can always demand absolute excellence, but we have to have an understanding that like absolute excellence is tough to attain. And like people may take a breath.
Mm-hmm.
As long as it's just a breath, all good. If it's a whole, marathon sleep fest, I'm like, okay, yeah, we got to have a legitimate conversation. But I thought that's where you're going. But what you said is, yeah, perfectly put. That is what my magic wand would change.
Janaki, this has been an incredible conversation. Thank you so much for joining me here this morning and this afternoon for you there on the East Coast. For all of our listeners out there, thank you so much for spending this time with us. Please like, rate, review, subscribe wherever you're listening. Let me know if there's anybody else that you would like to hear on a future episode of this podcast. And leave comments and send me your feedback on LinkedIn. Looking forward to talking with you and having you join us again soon.